She slid the envelope across the granite counter like she was dealing cards. "Sign it, Mark. Just sign it." And we both walk away clean. Divorce papers, drafted 6 weeks before I even knew she was leaving. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd already moved every dollar out of the joint account 48 hours earlier. And the man she was planning to start her new life with, he was about to get a phone call from his wife, a wife I had never met until yesterday. "My name is Mark Delaney. I'm 43 years old, and until about 4 months ago, I thought I had the kind of life people write greeting cards about. I'm a structural engineer in a mid-sized firm outside Raleigh, North Carolina. Not glamorous work. I inspect bridges, review blueprints, make sure nothing falls down. I take pride in that. Quiet pride. The kind that doesn't need an audience. My wife's name is Rhiannon. We met at a bookstore in Chapel Hill when she was 26 and I was 30. She worked in hospital administration, a unit coordinator at the time, climbing her way up. Smart, sharp-tongued in a way I found charming because it was never aimed at me. We'd been married 11 years, no kids. We had a rescue beagle named Jasper, a 3-bedroom craftsman on Holly Street, and a standing Saturday breakfast at a diner called Merle's where the waitress knew our order before we sat down. I never cheated. Never thought about it. I thought she hadn't either. Then one Tuesday in February, she came home from a hospital fundraiser at 9:30 at night, hung her coat on the hook, and looked at me like I was a house guest who'd overstayed his welcome. "You don't have to wait up for me," she said. Not rude. Worse than rude. Uninterested. The first red flag had a smell. Sandalwood, I think. Or something with leather in it. A cologne I didn't own. I noticed it on the collar of her black cardigan when I was moving laundry into the dryer. I lifted the fabric to my face before I could stop myself, and I stood there in the laundry room for a full minute, just breathing it in, trying to convince myself it was the dry cleaners. The second was her phone. She'd always left it face up on the nightstand. Now it lived face down, and the passcode had changed from my birthday to something she wouldn't tell me. "New hospital policy," she said. "HIPAA stuff." I nodded. I even apologized for asking. The third was a charge on our credit card statement. $84 at a steakhouse called the Ember Room in Durham on a Thursday night she'd told me she was working late. When I mentioned it, she didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that was a department dinner. Reimbursable. I forgot to put it on my work card." The next morning, she submitted a handwritten note to reimburse the household account. $84. Cash, tucked under the sugar bowl. A payoff dressed up as a correction. The fourth was Jasper. The dog stopped going to her. He'd always slept on her side of the bed, leaned against her legs when she sat on the couch. Around mid-March, he started following me from room to room. When she came home, he'd lift his head, then lay it back down. Dogs know. They always know. The fifth was the worst, because it was nothing at all. She stopped fighting with me. Rhiannon and I used to argue about stupid things. The thermostat, the way I loaded the dishwasher, whether her mother's visits should be 3 days or 4. Those arguments were the pulse of our marriage. In April, they stopped. Everything I did was fine. Everything was whatever. I told myself she was mellowing. I told myself I was lucky. What I was being erased. I found that on a Sunday morning. She left her laptop open on the kitchen table. She never did that. She was in the shower, and I walked past on the way to pour coffee, and there it was. Her personal email, the one she used for book club, and her sister in the vet. Wide open. I wasn't going to look. I'm not proud of the fact that I did, but I'm not ashamed either. A thread with no subject line, just a name at the top. Daniel. I didn't know a Daniel. I scrolled. The emails went back 7 months. The first one I clicked on said, "I know this is insane, and I have a husband. You have a wife, but I haven't stopped thinking about Tuesday. Please tell me you haven't either." It was dated September 12th. Our 12th wedding anniversary was September 14th. I'd taken her to a vineyard in Virginia that weekend. She'd cried at dinner and told me she was the luckiest woman alive. I kept scrolling. I read maybe 30 of them, enough to learn that Daniel was a cardiologist at the same hospital, that he was married with 2 daughters, that they had been meeting at a cabin his brother owned near Hillsboro, and that she had, at some point in January, written the words, "When we finally do this, we're both going to lose a lot, but I'll lose him first because he'll never see it coming. Him. Me. I'll never see it coming. I closed the laptop gently. I took 2 breaths. I poured the coffee. I put her mug next to mine like I did every Sunday. When she came downstairs in her robe, I smiled at her and said, "Morning, sweetheart." She smiled back. She kissed the top of my head. And something inside me, not broke. That's the word people always use, but it's wrong. Something inside me settled, like concrete setting. I went from a man to a structure, and a structure doesn't scream. The structure bears load until it chooses not to. I didn't confront her. I didn't even hint. For the next 6 weeks, I became the best husband Rhiannon had ever had. The night I found the emails, after she went to bed, I sat in my truck in the driveway for an hour and made a list in my phone. Not a revenge list, a list of facts. What I knew, what I didn't, what I needed to find out. Engineers don't panic. We survey, we measure, we plan. First, I made copies. I bought a cheap laptop at a big box store, paid cash. I signed into her email from it. The password was saved in our shared browser, another thing she'd gotten careless about, and I downloaded every message to a folder. Photos, itineraries, a hotel receipt, one blurry picture she'd sent him of herself in the bathroom mirror at a gas station. I saved it all to 2 encrypted drives. One I hid in the attic inside an old tax folder. The other I mailed to my cousin Denise in Pittsburgh with a note that said, "If anything happens to me, open this." She called me that night. I told her not to ask. She said, "Okay, Mark," and I loved her for that. Second, I found out who Daniel was. His last name was in a work email she forwarded him by accident. Daniel Acosta, M.D. Cardiology, 41. A quick search pulled up his hospital bio and a charity 5K photo. Then, and this was the moment I knew, a family portrait from a Christmas card his wife had posted on a neighborhood Facebook page she'd forgotten was public. 2 little girls in matching green dresses. A woman named Celeste with tired, kind eyes, standing next to a man who was about to blow her whole life apart and didn't even have the decency to be handsome about it. Third, I met with a lawyer, a woman named Teresa Vogel, recommended by a guy at my firm whose divorce had gone surgically well. I told her everything. She listened, took notes, and said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Delaney, in North Carolina, adultery isn't going to change your property split much, but dissipation of marital assets will. If she's been spending your money on him, document every cent. And one more thing. If you move first, you move clean. If you move second, you move desperate. Fourth, I move the money, not all of it, not illegally." On Teresa's advice, I opened a new account in my name, transferred exactly half of our liquid savings into it, my half, and left the other half untouched in the joint account. I did the same with the brokerage. Every transaction timestamped, reported, clean. I wasn't hiding money. I was protecting it. There's a difference, and the judge knows it. Fifth, and this was the part I sat on for 2 weeks before doing, I drove to the Acosta house. I didn't knock. I sat in my truck 2 blocks down and watched. I saw Celeste Acosta come out with a laundry basket. I saw her wave at a neighbor. I saw one of the little girls run across the lawn with a soccer ball. And I sat there and thought about what I owed this woman, which was nothing, and everything. Meanwhile, at home, I was Oscar-worthy. I made Rhiannon breakfast. I rubbed her feet while we watched a show she liked about British bakers. I booked a weekend in Asheville for our anniversary, which was still 4 months off. I booked it knowing we'd never go. I wanted it on the credit card statement. I wanted a paper trail of a husband in love. She noticed. Of course she did. One night in late April, she set down a wine glass and said, "Mark, are you okay? You've been so present lately." I looked up from my book and said, "I guess I just remembered how lucky I am." She held my eyes for a beat too long. There was something in her face, not guilt exactly, calculation. She was wondering if I knew. She was deciding whether to escalate her own timeline. 2 nights later, she did. She came downstairs with a folder in her hand and a rehearsed softness in her voice. She asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She said she loved me but wasn't in love with me. The oldest line in the book, she couldn't even be original. and that she thought we owed it to ourselves to be honest. She said she'd consulted an attorney just to understand her options. She slid the folder toward me. Draft separation agreement, dated 6 weeks earlier. She rented the house. She rented Jasper. She wanted the brokerage split down the middle, and for me to keep my retirement while she kept hers, which, because she'd worked in healthcare her whole career and I'd worked in a smaller firm, would have favored her by about $60,000. And she wanted it all done quickly. Amicably, she said. No lawyers making it ugly. I looked at the folder. I looked at her. And for the first time in 2 months, I let her see a flicker of something real. Not rage, but disappointment. The good kind. The kind that reminds the other person they used to matter. I'll read it tonight, I said, and I'll have my attorney look at it tomorrow. Her face moved. Just a twitch at the jaw. Your attorney? Teresa Vogel, I said. She's been expecting a call for a while. The crack started that same night. Rhiannon didn't sleep. I heard her pacing in the guest room, then the soft sound of her voice through the wall. Low, fast, the cadence of someone arguing with someone who wasn't supposed to exist. At 2 a.m, I heard a car pull up and idle at the end of the street. It sat there for 20 minutes, then it drove off. In the morning, she was already at the kitchen table when I came down, makeup on, hair done, which meant she hadn't slept but was going to pretend otherwise. She tried a new angle. Mark, maybe I moved too fast last night. Maybe we should talk to a counselor first. I shouldn't have sprung the papers on you like that. That's a kind offer, I said, pouring my coffee. But I think the papers were honest. Let's stay honest. She watched me over the rim of her mug. She was realizing, slowly for the first time, that something in the house had shifted, and she couldn't locate it. She was the one who'd spent 7 months operating with information I didn't have. Now the asymmetry was flipping, and she could feel it without being able to name it. That afternoon, while she was at work, I called Celeste Acosta. I'd gotten her number from the hospital directory page for spousal emergency contacts. Daniel had listed her, of course he had. A man like that never removes the scaffolding of his respectable life. I didn't block my number. I wasn't hiding. She picked up on the third ring. Hello, Mrs. Acosta, I said. My name is Mark Delaney. I don't know you. I'm sorry to call you like this. My wife has been having an affair with your husband for approximately 7 months. I have documentation. I would like to meet you in a public place. Your choice. Anytime. And give you copies. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just think you deserve to know. There was a long silence on the other end. Then quietly, is this a prank? No, ma'am. How do I know you're telling the truth? I'll send you one email. One. With a single attachment. You decide from there. I sent her the Christmas card thread. Rhiannon had forwarded one of Daniel's emails to her sister at one point with his full signature block on the bottom, hospital logo and all. It was the cleanest piece of evidence I had that proved it was him without showing Celeste anything she couldn't unsee. She called back 40 minutes later. Her voice was different, quieter, older. We met the next afternoon at a coffee shop in Carborough. I brought him a manila folder, just enough to make it real. Not so much that I seemed vindictive. I watched her hands while she read. They were steady until about the 4th page. Then they weren't. She put the folder down, pushed her coffee aside, and looked at me across the table with an expression I would carry with me as long as I live. Not anger, recognition. Like she'd known for months and had needed a stranger to say it out loud. Thank you, she said. And then after a long pause, what are you going to do? I've already done most of it, I said. I've got a lawyer. The money's protected. I filed this morning. She doesn't know yet. Celeste nodded slowly. When are you going to tell her? Tonight. Can I ask you for one thing? Yes. Don't tell her you met me. Not yet. I want to be the one who tells Daniel. I want to see his face when he realizes I know. I want that. I understood that completely. I went home that night and Rhiannon had made dinner. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a bottle of the wine we drank on our honeymoon in Spain. She'd lit candles. She was wearing a sweater I bought her 3 Christmases ago. The one she always said scratched her neck. She was making a last offer, one more test. Maybe, she was thinking. Maybe there's still a version of this where I keep the house, keep the retirement, and he writes off the last 11 years because he's too tired to fight. I sat down. I let her pour the wine. I said, I want to tell you about my day. I told her. All of it. Calmly. The lawyer. The account. The drives in the attic and in Pittsburgh. The coffee with Celeste Acosta. I named Danny. I named the cabin near Hillsborough. I named the date of the first email, September 12th, 2 days before our anniversary, and I watched her face go through 3 colors in the space of a minute. She tried denial first. I don't know what you're talking about. I slid my phone across the table, screenshot already open. She tried partial admission next. It wasn't what you think, Mark. It was emotional. We never... I slid a second screenshot. The gas station photo. She started to cry. Not the crying of a woman who feels caught. The crying of a woman who feels seen for the first time in a long time and doesn't like what she looks like in the mirror she's being handed. Mark, she said, please. I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But we have 11 years. We have a life. We have Jasper. Please. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I'd loved was still in there somewhere. I could see her at the bookstore in Chapel Hill. I could see her at the vineyard in Virginia. I loved those women. But the woman sitting across from me now, begging me to trade my dignity for the illusion of continuity, she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. Rhiannon, I said, you didn't make a mistake. You made a plan. You made 7 months of plans. The mistake was thinking I'd never see them. I stood up. I took my plate to the sink. I rinsed it. And I went upstairs and slept in the guest room. Jasper came with me. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Teresa Vogel was as good as advertised. Because I'd moved first and moved clean. And because Rhiannon had in fact been spending marital funds on hotel rooms and dinners with Daniel, the court was not generous with her. I kept my retirement. I kept the house. I bought her out of her half at fair market value. Jasper stayed with me. Daniel Acosta's wife filed for divorce the week after our coffee. I heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that the hospital's HR department got involved. Not because adultery was against policy, but because there had been questions about hours he billed on days he was at that cabin. His medical license wasn't revoked. His reputation didn't need a court to handle it. Rhiannon moved to an apartment in Durham. Last I heard, she and Daniel didn't last 6 months past the affair becoming public. Turns out the romance didn't survive being load-bearing. I still inspect bridges. I still have Saturday breakfast at Merle's, though I sit at the counter now instead of the booth. Jasper is 9 and going gray around the muzzle. I started dating again last fall, carefully, slowly. There's a woman named Leah. She's a librarian. She laughs at my bad jokes and she doesn't leave her phone face down. If you've ever loved someone who is already planning their exit, you know the worst part isn't the betrayal. It's the quiet months before, when they smile at you and you can't tell anymore if the smile is real. The only thing that saved me was refusing to scream. I let her think I was still asleep, right up until the moment I wasn't. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments.